And we are up. Episode number 27 of the Our Town podcast, coming to you from North Alabama and the future home of the to-be-named zoo that is sponsored by and going to be brought to you by the North Alabama Zoological Society. And sitting across from me today is Executive Director and Chairman, I believe, right, of the original, back in 2019, I think it says on your LinkedIn that you were the kind of the chairman of the society. Is that right?
I'm the chairman of the founding board, which is the original board that started, but now we have a governance board. But yeah, I'm the chairman of the original board.
Okay.
Yep.
As I was telling Ethan Woodruff that I kind of say this in just about every episode, whether it's recorded or before we go live, that I always end up having a lot of information. I've done a lot of research, and this was quite frankly a little overwhelming because number one, it's just kind of at that phase of it's not built yet, right? There's been a ton of planning, there's a ton of interest, there's a ton of excitement around this zoo. You gave me a ton of things that you all have done, and we're going to walk through a lot. As far as I want to go all the way back to kind of the conception, the inception of the idea and who planted that seed, all the way to kind of through where we are in the story now of bringing a zoo here. But first and foremost, how you enjoying this weather, man? Fall is here in Alabama, right?
It went from hot to chilly, which I'm loving it. Growing up in the north, sometimes a nice cool night is welcomed.
In like the mid 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I felt like it was our first summer here. I felt like July was what I expected, an Alabama hot July, but August, no, I didn't think August was too bad. And then here we are right into fall, and I think the hot days are behind us.
I wouldn't count on that.
You don't think so?
No.
Very well. So let's, as a primer, let's go ahead and do a kind of your, actually I'm going to switch over to the internet because I want to bring up your LinkedIn page just from a work experience standpoint. But let's just walk briefly through your life. You mentioned you're from the north. What does that mean? Kind of who is Ethan Woodruff? Because when people look at a zoo, and ultimately we're going to get there, we're going to figure out what your role ultimately will be. It's people need to understand there's a business side. Mm-hmm. There's a financial side to it because it is, even if it's not for profit, it has to make money to exist and function and operate. And then of course there's going to be the side of the best interests of the animals, right? That you mm-hmm. have and the caretaking and conservation, preservation, things like that. So you are not a zookeeper. You didn't major in zoological or anything like that. You're an engineer.
Yes.
And so let me quickly switch over. I'm going to bring up your, boom, there it is. And I hyper-focused just on your experience. But so that's your experience. But if you could, just step back a little bit, talk about a little bit about your growing up years. Where did you grow up? And then we'll come back to the personal side later on.
Okay. So I was born at the edge of Flathead Lake on the Flathead Indian Reservation. My family were dairy farmers and cattle ranchers. Grew up in the valley there.
Where is Flathead Lake?
Flathead Lake is in Montana.
Okay.
So northwest Montana, right in the middle of the Rockies. If you know where Glacier National Park is, mm-hmm. The river comes out of National Park and right into Flathead Lake. It's one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the Northwest. And that's where I grew up.
Okay. So then ultimately you go to school, you go to Montana State first, and then I think you transfer to Montana. Is that right?
So went to Montana State and met my wife.
Okay.
And that was a good reason to go there. She's a big Bobcat fan, growing up in Bozeman, Montana. And then I had the opportunity to, my degree was in physics, uh-huh. and I had an opportunity to go to University of Montana and to study that there. And so we switched schools, both of us, and we both ended up getting our degrees at University of Montana. But while my alumni is the Grizzlies, and I love watching them on game day, my wife is still a diehard Bobcat fan. So It's kind of split in the household right now.
And Montana State is a good program, right? I mean, on the football side, I think they've been known to be, I don't know if they're a powerhouse, right? But they've had a lot of success over the years. Haven't they?
Football, no.
No?
No, they're doing really good last year, and they're doing really good this year. Both Montana and Montana State are ranked really well starting out. So it's pretty enjoyable. Montana has won a couple of national championships. I actually played Marshall for one of those championships before Marshall went up. And so, no, they got really good football teams, but, we went to school to get a degree so that we could get a job.
Sure.
And Montana's beautiful. I love Montana. My heart is there. But it's a lot of scenery. So, you have to get your degree and then you got to go find a job.
Yeah.
And so that led me to going across the Mississippi for the very first time and living in Florida.
Okay.
So, and in Florida, I worked for the Air Force as a contractor, and it's where
that's where you were working with BAE or
yep,
yeah, BAE Systems.
Yeah,
yeah.
So doing what's called hardware in the loop, and one of the things that I was fortunate, I had a lot of great mentors there, and one of the things I was fortunate to do was use this software called MATLAB. As a matter of fact, it's why I got the job, was because in college I knew how to program in Fortran and MATLAB. I have a physics degree, but I'm an engineer by career, and they needed somebody that knew how to take Fortran and convert it to MATLAB.
Oh, wow.
So besides having a degree and those two things, I was able to really cut my teeth there. And we started doing a bunch of different things with that software package. And I would find bugs, which you find bugs in all software, and I'd report it back to the MathWorks, the people that make MATLAB. And one day they called me up and said, "Hey, do you know anybody looking for a job?" I said, "No, but I'll just keep my eyes open."
Yeah.
Went home and told my wife, and she said, "You go call them back." So that started a process of moving up to Boston, where the MathWorks is located at. Worked for them for 12 and a half years, starting off as an application engineer and moving more into consulting and business development and marketing and kind of it was all sales, and traveling around the world, doing some really cool things.
Yeah.
One time I went and visited Apple, and they were using our tools, and I was helping them out for the day, and they brought me in this room, and Apple's super secretive. We worked with several different people from Apple, and matter of fact, I probably even shouldn't say that I worked with Apple, but you couldn't tell even though that I was working with this one group in Apple, I couldn't tell the other groups that I was working with them. I mean, they're very compartmentalized. But I walk into this room, and everything's curtained off except for this one station where we're doing all the work at. And so I get them up and going and help them out. And a year later, I come back, and they said, "Hey, by the way, do you want to know what you're helping us with?" And I said, "Well, yeah, if you can tell me."
Yeah.
And so they take out the iPhone and flipped it over the back, and they said that the mechanical focus in the new iPhone is what you were helping us with. So that was kind of cool. I mean, it was one of the leading edge type of technologies, and I was right there. So that offered a lot of really cool experiences and exposure to different things. That job, and then I did that traveling. It kind of wears on you, and so I did that for 12 and a half years. And I have 4 kids, and the 2 oldest, for most of their life, and especially high school life, I was traveling. Mom had to take care of everything while I was in California or another country or wherever I was. And so we decided that, after the second one had graduated from high school and was head off to college and such, that it might be a good time to do a career change. And so we started looking around, and the first thing she said, we were living in Michigan at the time, and she said,
So you went to Boston originally, and then at some point they transferred you to an office in Michigan.
yeah, what we learned living in Boston was that this Northwesterner, kind of a hick from the sticks, doesn't quite go so well with the New England culture.
Sure.
We love Boston. Matter of fact, we're going to be heading back to Boston in a few weeks to visit again.
Great place to visit.
Love it,
Yeah.
but culture-wise, not a great fit. So I was able to transfer to our Detroit office, and that was a better fit for us. So that's where we lived for about 10 years. And
Wow.
and so, but when it was time to leave, she said, "I'm tired of shoveling snow, so find me someplace with snow." Matter of fact, I will go find someplace with snow, and if you want to come, you can come.
Gotcha.
Otherwise,
That's quite the spread from Montana to Florida to Massachusetts to Michigan, and then ultimately down. And then I guess she found Alabama. She found Huntsville for you, or did you find?
No,
that?
So originally we came down, and I was working for it doesn't exist anymore, but Quadrant Rain Services.
Okay.
So I don't know if some people know, but on Redstone, a lot of the testing out in the Pacific from missiles and missile defense is done on a atoll called Kwajalein.
Okay.
Okay. And we have an Army base out there, and through different experiences, we kind of thought that would be a cool place to kind of go and just experience that, out in the middle of the Pacific and do that. And so a job opening came up for Quadrant Rain Services, and we actually thought we were applying to go out there. Turned out that we were applying to come here. And because we lived in the South previously,
Yeah.
we're like, you know what? Let's go. Love it. We got down here, and we're putting down deep roots. We're not planning on leaving.
Yeah.
We love it here. So this is the last stop.
So let me ask you. I'm going to ask you two questions. One, how it's difficult if you were to try to explain to someone that has never tasted salt. Like how do you convey that to someone, right? How do you find the words to, what does salt taste like? Well, how do you explain to someone what it's like to live in the big sky country and the vastness of that, right? I mean,
yeah,
it is one of those things when you're there, and I actually have never been to Montana, but I've been to Wyoming and Utah, Colorado, Idaho, but still, or the Dakotas. I've been to the Dakotas either. But I have to imagine, because you just hear people come back and just remark, it's unreal, it's unbelievable. How do you explain that to someone?
I don't know. I just kind of agree with them. Yeah, it's great.
I mean, there's nothing like it, right?
I wouldn't say that. The one thing that we have learned, I had a kind of a small sheltered life living up in Montana and going to school in Montana. Living a little bit. Actually, went to one semester at in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which was awesome. That school is literally right on Lake Coeur d'Alene. It's beautiful.
Sure.
But I was like, I'm not going to like it. And as a matter of fact, the 4 places that I didn't want to move to out of college was Florida.
Right.
Well, guess what happened there? Utah, California, and New England. Well, guess what happened there? So that leaves Utah and Colorado, or California next. But I spent a lot of time working in Utah and California with the math work. So, and again, the reason for Utah is just because of we got lots of family there.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that was Hill Air Force Base.
I've been to Hill Air Force Base. Actually, I did a lot of work. I can't remember the name of the agency, but I did a lot of work at Utah State.
Okay.
Where there's a space agency there. Did a lot of work with them, actually, up in Cache Valley. That was
up in Logan.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you do. One thing I did learn was that every place has some wonderful things. It's got some wonderful food.
Sure.
The scenery is unique and exciting. When you live in Florida, I dare you to try to find a rock,
Yeah.
that hasn't been brought into the state.
Right.
It's all stand, and I believe the highest point in Florida is Sand Mountain or Sand Hill, and it's like 365 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
And then you go up to New England and you have this other,
Sure.
so it's beautiful wherever you go. I've really learned to appreciate
Yeah.
what every place has.
Well, that's the spirit of the Our Town podcast, right? I mean, I'm originally from Utah, but spent most of my life in Virginia, and now I'm here, and wherever I'm at, that's my town, right? And of course, I miss other places I've lived, but right now, this is where I live. I'm all in. We're loyal to Huntsville, the greater Huntsville, Madison area, and all of Alabama, right? And that's just an attitude that I take that certainly helps me in life.
Well, and you get to go back to visit, right?
Oh,
yeah. Because there are certain things in certain restaurants, like, we got to go to Detroit. We're going to go to Buddy's Pizza because that's what you do. And that's just great stuff. You go back to Boston, we're going to go back to our old haunts that, and you go back to Virginia, there's a few restaurants and different things that you're like, okay. And you go visit, get at that in. And
there's a couple of traces. Speaking of Logan, Utah, Crumble Cookie is out of Logan.
Yeah.
And so is all the Blackstone griddles. I have a Blackstone griddle now. They're taking over the world. And Camp Chef, I think, is out of Logan. So there's something about the backyard cooking industry where it's like Logan is like the hub, right? And Crumble Cookie. So there's traces of that here, right? And Blackstone's doing really good. They're running their product through Walmart.
Wow.
And Crumble's all over the place. All right. So now the next question is, as we, and then we're going to transition to talking about NALZS and the zoo and all that. But when did the love of animals kind of enter the picture, right? Because you're an engineer, but in 2019, you become the chairman of the founding board of NALZS and now an executive director. And it's all volunteer for now, right? It's a nonprofit. Yep. But talk to us a little bit about that as far as when did that kind of enter the picture? Just a fascination and appreciation for animals?
Well, I mean, my whole life has been around animals.
Okay.
When you grow up on a farm, you can't just go down the street, hang out with your friend. You got animals to take care of and spend time with. And
how big was this farm?
So each of the farms were about 80 acres.
Oh wow! Okay.
I'm trying to think. The dairy farms had about 100 cows each. So I was lucky enough to have both sets of grandparents. We all lived within 3 miles of each other.
Wow.
But we had horses, chickens, goats. We had this really mean goat that as kids we'd grab his horns and yank him around.
Oh.
And we had to do that because if we turned our backs, he was after us,
really?
Chasing us. I mean, it was mutual.
What was his name? Did you name him?
Yeah, we did. French Toast. I don't know. It's kids, But
that's funny.
We had sheep, and you spend time with the other thing you learn is, especially on dairy farms, because the way that dairy farms work is that a cow has a calf, and through that process, that's when they start having milk that you can, that you can milk. So at some point, you actually take the calf away from the mom so that you can milk her, but then you raise the calf on milk that you get from mom anyhow. But it's hand raising the calf, and so feeding calves and hanging out with the calves, and they're just cute and funny, and they love on you and they play with you too, and then the same thing with lambs. Unfortunately, sometimes the mothers don't always take the lambs, and so you get what's called a bum lamb. So you got to take care of them, and so it's fun taking care of the animals, and you really love and appreciate the animal, and so that's where the love came. Also, where I lived and grew up was at the foot of what used to be called the National Bison Range. The Native American tribe in the Flathead Reservation now have taken it over and are running it, and they're doing a wonderful job. And they're working with actually a lot of zoos to get bison back to their genetic purity, because of what happened was because they went away, there's a lot of cattle genes in a lot of bison. And so what they're doing is trying to get back to the genetic purity of the true bison. And so we lived at the foot of that, and I spent a lot of time up with the on that National Bison Range, looking at the bison and the elk and the deer and foxes and grouse and whatever else was out in
Gotcha.
the woods.
So you, with 80 acres, you had that proverbial back 40. You had a front 40 and a back 40, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So let's pause there, and I'm sure we'll come back. But I think we have a lot of material when it comes to NALZS, right, and the zoo. And I should have done this at the beginning, but I'm kind of glad I waited. So let me now try to tie together a few things. One, so yesterday or last week I interviewed John Allen, and then tomorrow it'll be released, episode 26. He's the CEO of the Committee of 100. And then from there, I believe and that started in 1995. Listen, watch the episode and kind of, he'll explain the whole Committee of 100, what that means. But one thing they did was commission the Launch 2035 initiative back in 2015 or so. In a couple weeks, I'm going to interview Rob Hamilton, who's the current president of Launch 2035. And then from there, there's a few committees. There's the Land Use and Development Committee. And so Sarah James, who works for TARCOG, and she was one of the guests that we just had. Nancy Robertson is the co-chair for the Land Use and Development Committee, along with Dr. Joe Denoto, who works for Ignite. And so this is and then John Kavach, Singing River Trail, also came out of 2035 as an initiative to kind of connect northern Alabama. So just from the past episodes, in the last 5 or 6 episodes, we have someone from the top Alabama Regional Council of Governments talk about what they're doing, in the case of Sarah James, on getting federal funding and state funding for different projects, helping the Singing River Trail to work with any sort of issues or the needs in certain municipalities to make the trail a reality, which is now 200 miles. I think the original idea was around 70 miles, even less than that. Now it's 200 miles of trail. So my first question is, is NALZS was that a function of something that came out of either Launch 2035 or the Committee of 100? So talk about the idea, right? For Huntsville's going to get, the greater Huntsville, North Alabama, I shouldn't say Huntsville, North Alabama they want a zoo. Where does that idea start, and kind of who's sponsoring that idea?
Great question. So originally it was not part of any of those efforts. Now, as we were growing and moving on, we're starting to dovetail in and gaining support. If you look at our website, Launch 2035 has endorsed the project.
Okay.
It ticks off several of the check boxes that Launch 2035 was created for, mainly land use and regionalism and economic development, workforce development, and that type of stuff. It actually is a lot of other things. It started from an interaction at another zoo. So, if I might, my third oldest daughter, she had to go down to Birmingham for a basketball camp, and we moved here in 2016, and so we hadn't had a chance yet to go to the Birmingham Zoo. And as a family, we love to go to zoos. We whenever we go to a new area, new town, we try to see whatever zoo or an aquarium is there. And we hadn't yet been to the Birmingham Zoo. So this whole week I'm driving down to Birmingham and dropping her off and kind of tooling around Birmingham until she's done, and then picking her up and bringing her back to Huntsville. On Friday, I looked at my youngest and asked her, "Hey, you want to do a little daddy-daughter date here? I'm going. You're out of school. You're just gonna sit here. So
right.
Might as well you and I hang out." And she's like, "Yeah." I said, "You want to go to the zoo?" She was like, "Yeah," because like I said, we love going to zoos. And so when we went to the zoo, we got there bright and early. It hadn't opened yet. We just kind of wait in the parking lot until they're ready. And it was a nice, beautiful May morning. Wasn't hot, wasn't humid. It just perfect. And they opened up, and we went in, and her favorite animal is a sloth.
Okay.
And so we knew that there was a sloth at the zoo, and we hurried up and bustled over there and saw the sloth, and it was out, and she just was cooing and on and all this stuff. And I got a picture of her, and a lot of times at zoos, people come look and they move. They come look and they move, and they come and look and they move. We're not quite that way. We're trying to enjoy what we're seeing and reading the placards and that type of stuff. And as we're sitting there and she's watching the sloth move at how fast sloths move, and hanging there in the tree limb, I started seeing these people move by us doing that, seeing, and little kids getting excited. And really one of the reasons why they move is because, the small attention span that little kids have.
Yeah.
But they're seeing and they get excited, and then they move along, and the next family group comes through, and I really started to watch these people and see the excitement on these little kids and the excitement these parents and these grandparents had. And I was like, huh. And then we left that area and started walking around the rest of the part of the zoo, and I'm noticing these moms with strollers in their Starbucks coffees and kind of in their workout walking outfits, and they're talking and they're doing their getting their steps.
They're getting their steps in.
Yeah, they're getting their steps in and pushing. And Birmingham Zoo's got some nice little heels, so they it's a good workout. But again, here's these people enjoying themselves, talking, conversing, relating, and then we went around some more areas, and then finally I was at the butterfly garden. And as I walk in there, there's a grandmother with, he must have been 5. He was just a 5-year-old little boy. And she was kneeled down in front of him, and he had a butterfly on his finger. And she was trying to help him hold it steady so it would stay there. And the look of awe and excitement. Can you imagine a little 5-year-old just holding his hand steady while that butterfly's on his finger? And and again, the joy that grandmother had seeing her grandson connect. And that's what it is. It's connecting. We get a little side note here. We get told every now and again, why do we need a zoo? It doesn't happen very often, but occasionally somebody said, why do we need a zoo? We can just watch Animal Planet.
Wow.
Well, yeah, you can. I encourage you to do so. But Animal Planet doesn't connect you to the animal. Like you and I talking right here. You and I could, email back and forth, and I could watch your podcast, but that doesn't connect us.
I still expect you to watch all of them, but
I will.
Thank you.
But that doesn't connect you. It's the interaction that connects you.
Yeah.
And that's when people start to really care. But it also has an effect on you. And like I said, you're watching these people around the animals, and the animals are doing their thing, and they're well taken care of. Birmingham does a great job. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, and this is back in 2018-ish. Yeah, no, 2019, May of 2019. And I said, and everything was coming out in the papers. Huntsville's growing. Huntsville's going to be the biggest city in 5-10 years.
Right.
Lo and behold, we didn't realize that we're going to be the biggest city in like a year and a half.
Yeah, the next year.
But all this stuff was coming out. I'm like, well, how come we don't have a zoo? And so then that started the process of thinking, okay, well, let's figure out why we don't have a zoo. Let's do the research. I'm an engineer. I do business development. Let's figure this out. Let's do a trade study. Let's see if it's even feasible. Maybe it's not feasible. That's why it's not here. Come to find out, there's been a few attempts. There was one up in by Limestone County Jail, and luckily I was told, this is what everybody said, the inmates never got out, but the tigers and the cats sometimes did. So I'm not quite sure what happened with that zoo, but there have been some other attempts and some more successful than others.
So when you say let's figure this out, is this just you, or do you have a partner in crime?
So at the beginning, it was just me because the first person I had to convince was my wife.
Sure.
Because again, we're doing this volunteer. We're putting our energy and efforts into this, and her and I, when we do something, it's not like, okay, just a little bit here, a little bit there.
You're all in.
We're all in. Yeah.
And she's batting 1,000 and giving you advice. It sounds like anyway.
Yeah. Well, and so I had to convince her, and so I did the research, did all the trade study. It took me about a month and a half. Found out that it's feasible.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I went to her and I said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something." She said, "No." I didn't even get it out one time. She's like, "No."
She just knows you well enough.
Yeah, she just knows me well enough. And I said, "Okay." But I know her well enough, so I waited 2 weeks. And I said, "Hey, I really think that we need to look at this, and so I kind of talked to her a little bit about it, and she said, "No." And I said, "Okay." And I waited 2 more weeks. And she said, "All right, show me all the stuff." And so I showed it to her. And I said, "Hey, it's feasible. What I need to do now is talk to some other people and more that have experience in business and different things like that." And so she said, "Okay, go find out. If they say that this looks like a good plan, then
right.
we'll do it." And so I went and showed a couple financial people and some lawyers and I said, "What do you guys think?" And they're like, "Yeah, I don't know why this hasn't been done yet, And so that's where it started. And matter of fact, they helped form the original board.
Okay.
The founding board. And then we started as a nonprofit. Now there's a couple of different ways to go about this and in the zoo world and actually in any type of business adventure of this sort. You can be public, so be attached to a city like Montgomery. The zoo for Montgomery is part of the city. It's part of their park and rec. And then
it's funded by the city.
Yeah, it's funded by the city. Yep. Now that's kind of a lot of zoos. Original zoos were started that way. Right? Somebody gave them an elephant and another thing in the park, and then they created a zoo, and it grew from there. And usually it was part of their park and rec facilities.
Right.
But it's difficult for cities to maintain that as a public, and so a lot of zoos have spun off as either private or nonprofit, and so if you actually look at Birmingham, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I researched, Birmingham did that. They spun theirs off as a private organization, and then they have a charter with the city, and they work with the city. So it's still kind of a city zoo, but it's a private organization.
Yeah.
They also have a nonprofit foundation that's attached to it, and so they have the best of all three worlds in some respect that way. And then there's just nonprofit. So like a lot of the New York zoos are run by the Wildlife Conservation Society. And so that's a nonprofit. And so when we look at it, we're like, okay, well, starting off, it'll be harder, and definitely is harder, but there is more avenues for help if we start off as a nonprofit and then work from that point. And so that's what we did. We started the nonprofit, built up our board. The first thing we did was built up credibility. Unfortunately, it literally started out in my garage.
Yeah.
And, as quickly as we can, we got it out of my garage because that's not legitimate. That's, what is this, what does this group want to build a zoo, and they're working out of somebody's garage. So, we have an address. It's a virtual address because everybody works virtually, but, we strive for legitimacy as quick as possible, and we're always working on our legitimacy and our credibility in that regard. Now, back to your original thought, the other thing that we did was we looked for endorsements. And so we worked on meeting with all the cities and all the city mayors. We've done that. Different different local officials, different big businesses, Tarcog, launched. John Allen was one of the first people I've talked to. He gave us great advice, and then moved on from there. And it's more recently that we have gained a lot of support and endorsement from those organizations as we've built up that legitimacy. The other thing that we realized is, we're started to start a zoo, but we have right now we have, I want to say 66 volunteers. That includes staff and also board members, and it's a working board, so they get involved as much as the staff does too. But in doing that, we realize that we're not a zoo yet, but we are a nonprofit, and we're the North Alabama Zoological Society. Zoological societies are all about education and conservation.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need a zoo to do that.
That's true.
It's helpful, and we'll love the day that we actually have a home for that work. But we've been able to go out and do summer camps and do our kids festival up on Montesano and do a lot of STEAM. We prescribe to the STEAM, not just STEM, but STEAM, because we feel like it's all of that makes it well-rounded.
A is agriculture. Is that in the STEAM? Art. Okay.
Yeah. So it's science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
Got it.
And the art is actually, art is, everybody loves art, but when you look at the way artists think and way you have to think when you're doing art, it brings another perspective on a way to think and solve problems.
Sure.
And that's why they're including art as part of STEM. And because again, I do engineering and business development during the day, and we solve problems.
Yeah.
That's what we're trained to solve problems.
Right.
But sometimes, things that are, and creating a zoo isn't one of these, you kind of have to think a little bit different sometimes to solve those problems. You can't just look at the textbook way of doing it, and that doesn't get you ahead. It doesn't move things forward all the time. And so having different perspectives and different ways to look at a problem and solve it also produces very unique and sometimes even better solutions. So the STEAM is great in that respect. And we do tons of STEAM, as much as we can with just a group of volunteers. And so that's currently going on. We're out in the community doing that type of stuff. And
so in a way, you were able to kind of get a start without a zoo.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to, kind of from a promotion, advertising perspective, getting the word out, looking for a legitimacy, mm-hmm. right? And then being able to, through those camps and field trips, if you will, for the kids, right?
Yep.
Getting their kind of early buy-in. And did you kind of present the plan to them in those opportunities as far as, hey, this is what's coming in the next few years?
Yeah, and we're trying to do this as quickly as possible because, one, we know that the public in general kind of loses interest.
Yeah.
If it's a 10-year project, I hope it's not. We're starting year 4. But that also adds to our legitimacy that we're not going away, right? But you want to keep the public engaged on the project and the goals of the project, and so. Having these other activities, now we're looking at the business side of it, right? Having these other activities keeps us relevant. Now, on the cause side of things, which we all are passionate about, we're doing great work. We're getting communities involved. We had an instance where, and this is kind of sad, but hooray for us. We had an instance where we're putting on a camp, and a mother called us up and said, "Hey, I have an autistic son. Can he come?" I'm like, well, yeah. She said, "Oh, well, the other camps won't let him come." I don't know what all those other camps are. I'm not aware of any organizations that don't, but we're super inclusive. And we have all sorts that come to the camp because they get to be out in nature. One of the sites that we're looking to put part of the zoo on is on Limestone Creek. And, I think they said at the last camp, they had all the kids raise their hand who ever swam in a creek or a pond. And like one person.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're like, well, today's the day, and they get to go out there and experience nature and the good and the bad. There's snakes out there. There's poison ivy. There's all this things that wants to kill you. And our camp counselors our camp counselors are teenagers out of high school, and we train them, and this is an opportunity for them to volunteer and do this. And then there's the adult leadership, but they go out there to prepare everything the best they can. They prepare the kids, and we're very, very, very cautious. But it allows them to get off the couch and be in nature and experience nature to its fullest. And when they're safe, they get to have lots of fun, and they do. And they float up and down Limestone Creek. That's one of the days they do it. And they look at another example of they go in and find different things in the water, right?
Yeah.
And then we have these microscopes that they can look at it. And one day they found some crawdads. I mean, that's what you do when you're at a creek. You find some crawdads and all these other minnows and stuff. Well, they found these crawdads and they found some bloodworms. And one of the kids didn't have enough containers to put them both in, so he put them both in the same container.
Oh, boy.
And he came back and the bloodworms were gone. And he goes, where'd the bloodworms go?
Just gave him lunch.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's I mean, these are super cool experiences that these kids get to have. And we're also working with other businesses to give scholarships to underprivileged youth. And that's been really great too, to see these youth come out that wouldn't have this experience normally. Yeah. And we go out. And the other part of this is for a scholarship, it's not just being able to come and enjoy and learn and experience. These youth don't have the means. So they may not have the lunch. They may not have the right shoes or socks or gear. Yeah. And so these scholarships so we go out and with the scholarship money, go to a store, we set them up with everything they need. We provide them a gas card to make sure that they can get to the camp and we get them there. So that's awesome. We provide everything that they need so that they can come and enjoy and be kids out in the woods.
Now, is all of that kind of through that grassroots effort and the volunteers that you had pulled together? So now talk about where we're at now as far as the organization that you've kind of that you've latched onto, I'm assuming, to kind of help say, okay, let's go next level. You've selected a site. I believe it's been purchased or it's in the works. The Lansing company is involved. Can you start talking about that?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I wonder if I have my facts incorrect based on just what I saw on the website.
Your facts are a little bit old.
Okay.
So this is a big project.
Yeah.
This is, final price tag at the moment, although we've got inflation, so things could change. But for the whole complete zoo, and I hate telling people this number because then they focus on that number. And the reality is we're not going to build it all at once. Yeah. We're going to build it in phases. Sure. And a lot like how we've been building up the organization. But the big number is $240 million to build what our architects and everybody's designed. And again, we went to the experts, the people that BRPH is a partner of ours. They're the architects. They build rides and exhibits for Disney World and Universal Studios. They also work here on the Arsenal doing, the test stand for some of the tests out on the Arsenal. Mm-hmm. So they have a huge amount of experience in this type of stuff. And they went and got the foremost experts in designing zoos. Okay. And together they came up with this plan. Now the zoo or The name just slipped my mind. I apologize. You can go find it on the website.
Yeah.
But
Of the zoo designer?
yeah, it's Becker.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Yeah. While you're looking it up, I'll tell you, they design Animal Kingdom, and they're designing other zoo expansions as we speak. They're kind of the foremost designers of zoos. Perry Becker, that's what it is.
Perry Becker.
Perry Becker,
Okay.
yeah. Perry Becker
Perry
Design
Becker.
is
Okay.
the zoo architects. So, that's the other thing is we know that we're not experts in this. We know that a big zoo like what we're building, with the exception of Animal Kingdom, has been built since the late 60s, early 70s. Okay. So while the knowledge base is out there, and we've talked to some of them that were part of some of those zoos and gotten, advice and stuff, we're looking towards the experts. We're grabbing the experts. We're pulling them all in to help design this zoo. Now back to the question about the site. One of the things for legitimacy's sake, we ran into, they were going to put a theme park out in Muscle Shoals, and that ended up being a big Ponzi scam. And one of the things they never did is they never told us where it was going to be. And so,
Gotcha.
in big projects like this, a lot of times you don't come out until everything's for sure, right?
Yeah.
But we felt to help. Well, we felt pretty sure about this actually. There was a property out in Limestone County, just off of I-65. A developer named Greg Lansing was working on purchasing that property from the owners. The property was previously set aside for the Volkswagen plant that never.
Okay.
It was kind of one of those things that Volkswagen was going to come here. That was the site. And at the last minute, Tennessee stole them away and they moved up to Chattanooga. That's my understanding. It happened before I moved here. But it's had all the utilities and gas, and it had everything for starting something like a zoo and big things like this. So it was perfect. And so Lansing was purchasing this, and we are working out a deal that would purchase our portion, about 280 acres, from him. So now at about March timeframe, Mr. Lansing,
March of 2021?
yeah,
Okay.
just this last March.
Okay.
He was supposed to close the deal, and unfortunately, he found out that he had cancer.
Oh.
Yeah, and so some of his backers backed out on him because he's a developer, and so he has investors and stuff. And some of them backed out on him, so he needed a little bit more time to find new ones. But the sellers didn't want to wait anymore, and so they let the purchase agreement kind of fault at that point. And at that point, we were looking at, okay, well, who else can we bring in as a developer to do a similar type of deal? And we met with lots of people. To my understanding, there's still lots of people that are interested in that property that want us there that we've talked to or haven't talked to yet. We're talking with the realtors and stuff. So at the moment, we're still looking at that property as a location. Yeah, there you go. That's the location where the zoo is going to be. If it's not, we've also identified other alternative spots in the very close area of that. So the zoo is going to be somewhere in that area, and we're working with realtors and different officials in Limestone County and different folks. So
for those who are only listening to the podcast, we have a map of it's on I-65, this property, and it's on the west side as you go north. So if you're on 565 going west, you're going to go north on I-65, and it's not even halfway up to Athens, right? It's on the left side. It's the primary site you're looking at.
So it is south of Tanner.
South of Tanner.
So the Browns Ferry Road, everybody knows where the new Buc-ee's is coming in, and everybody's excited about that. I've never been. I'm excited about it.
I've heard about this too.
So where the Buc-ee's is just south of there, and then north of the I-65, 565 interchange.
Okay.
So it's actually in a great area. As we talk to officials, they get pretty excited when I say, well, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put giraffes right there on the right next to the freeway. So anybody coming anybody coming from Chicago down to the beach, they're going to see these giraffes. And they're going to say, oh, hey, now, the kids are just going to want, Dad, stop, Mom, stop.
Sure.
And so they're going to see this, and it's going to pull traffic off the road. And so when you look at the economic development type of portions of this, it has the potential to really increase the tourism for our area. Because one of the things that we have a lot of people from the Midwest driving down 65 to go to the beaches. And it's about halfway for them. I used to live in Michigan. I have friends that drive past my house and don't stop because that 20 miles off the road is just a little too much for them.
Yeah.
It's, and so that's the nice thing is, we have the Buc-ee's, Limestone County and Athens are developing a lot of great stuff. Huntsville is moving that direction. Decatur's doing a great job too. We're really creating a potential destination, truly a destination spot, not just the U.S. Space and Rocket Center place, but a destination spot for people to stop, spend a couple days, and that'll really help the region. And that's one of the reasons why it works so well with Launch 2035, because it's not, Launch 2035 is not about, and I apologize if I'm putting words in their mouth, but what I know is they're not about Huntsville. They're not about a specific city. They're about the region.
Sure.
And again, the Singing River is the same thing. And so having another regional thing is going to only enhance our area.
I can imagine if you're driving south on I-65 and you kind of cross over the border into Alabama from Tennessee, you're going to have some billboard advertising, like you said, right? There's other parts of the country, I'm thinking like south of the border in South Carolina, where for miles and miles, right, you're enticed to stop because they've had these clever billboards telling you, basically, you got to stop, you got to check it out, buy some fireworks or whatever, because Pedro says.
I think you said you hadn't been to the Dakotas yet?
I haven't been to the Dakotas yet.
Oh, if you drive through the Dakotas, matter of fact, it starts in Montana.
Does it?
It starts in Montana. There are billboards saying, have you gotten your ice at Waldrug?
Oh, really?
And you're like, what? And again, I lived in Bozeman for 3-4 years.
Right.
And I kept seeing these billboards in Bozeman, Montana. And so finally, when we moved across the Mississippi, we drove into South Dakota. And it just so happened that it was Labor Day weekend, and we were going to stay around Mount Rushmore. Well, that didn't happen. And, this is poor college students just out of college heading to their first job. And the first hotel that we could get was in Wall, South Dakota.
Yeah.
And so we stopped, got the hotel, and we went in, and we had the babies, and so we had to make some formula for them, for the baby to eat. And we turned on the tap, and the cold water was hot.
Oh, boy.
And the hot water was really hot. So now I understand why you get ice at Walled, because the water it's naturally hot. So.
Gotcha.
But you're just when you said that, it just made me think of that. Those billboards, if you do it right, people will stop.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing we're excited about is when we moved to Huntsville, to North Alabama and to Huntsville, we really love it. We really, really love it. And unfortunately, and you probably got the similar type of thing, when people knew you're moving to Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
They gave you like,
you sure about that?
Sure about that?
Right. Like, I'm 100% sure.
And Alabama doesn't have the best, the football team everybody knows about, but otherwise Alabama doesn't always have the best name out in the rest of the United States. But North Alabama is just so wonderful. I love it. Yes, there are things that we need to fix, and there's problems and stuff. And like I said, I've moved around, and so there's problems and things that need to be fixed all over the place. And some are very serious ones. So I don't want to, to trivialize those, but North Alabama is really great place to live.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as nature goes, people don't realize that Alabama is the fourth most biodiverse state in the United States. And on the east side of the Mississippi, it's the number one.
Wow.
And a lot of that is right here in North Alabama.
Sure.
Right along the Tennessee River. So we got nature here, we got activities. It's just a wonderful place, and the people are so great. Generally speaking, you walk down the street, people wave at each other, are nice to each other, and
pleasant disposition.
Here's another story for you. When we lived in Boston, we had some friends that lived in Florida come up and visit us. And he was bound and determined to get somebody to say hi to him as we're walking around the streets of Boston.
Oh, boy.
And it didn't happen. He'd say, hello, hi, how you doing? And they'd look at him really weird.
Let me go back to that. I'm going to go back to the location and just ask a couple questions on some stuff that I was trying to do research. So, as a comparison, I think the Birmingham Zoo is like 122 acres. So this potential site's at least almost 2.5 times bigger.
Right.
But I thought I read something where there were 600 something acres available, right? And of which 279 would be for the zoo. Do you have any idea or insight into what those other 300 plus acres will be used for?
Well, I know what Lansing had ideas for. But Lansing is not involved. Currently, to my knowledge, he still is interested as far as I know. But at this point,
okay,
I've been told whether or not he's re-engaged or at that point. He's almost done with his cancer treatment, and so we're pretty hopeful that goes really well. There's thoughts and there's plans of different ways to use it. A good portion of it is wetlands. So if you think about half of it are about wetlands, and the other half is cotton field, right? And for us, I'm just going to say 300 acres because it's a nice round number. About half of that was wetlands, and the other half was going to be the zoo, the zoo proper play. For us, it's okay to have wetlands for part of the zoo because animals actually would prefer that. There's a lot of animals would prefer to be in the wetlands in the swampy areas, cooling off in the heat of the day. And so, that's actually very advantageous for us. Whereas a developer, they're trying to figure out how to get around the wetlands and there's things called wetland credits and different things that they do with that. But for us, it was very advantageous. We're like, oh yeah, we'll take some of the wetlands. Now we do need some things without the wetlands because people need to be walking, and we need to have, it's a business, and so you need to have business type stuff for revenue producing and different things. Now as far as plans, there's lots of talks of mixed use development, just different things. So not a lot that I can say at the moment.
Sure.
But,
so let's pull up this. I pulled up this graphic, and actually, so this is material you provided to me that come from briefings, right? That you probably give a number of briefings to people, and this is from that package. But this is interesting as you consider the zoo trail, and more than a couple questions can come from this. But Nashville has a zoo and an aquarium. And Birmingham has a zoo. I'm not as familiar with what Montgomery and Mobile have, but so number one, it just seems like if you look at this line that's been drawn, it is kind of cool to add the Huntsville area, the North Alabama to the zoo trail. But then if you can talk about what you need to keep in mind where Nashville has what it's known for, right? When you go to Nashville to see X, Y, and Z, and you might go to Birmingham to see X, Y, and Z, then what's the niche going to be for North Alabama, for our zoo, right? And can you talk about that and some of the constraints that you're trying to, and or requirements related to that? Yeah.
So one of the pushbacks that we initially get from people are, well, there's a zoo in Chattanooga. That's an hour and a half away. There's a zoo in Nashville. That's 2 hours away. There's a zoo in Birmingham. That's an hour, 45 minutes away. Why do we need one here?
Right.
is that going to take away from their experience? And in the good news, at least what I feel is really good, is we've got a lot of support from them. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to personally I haven't, but some members of our team have talked to the Nashville Zoo. I've talked to the Birmingham Zoo and the Montgomery Zoo and the Alabama Gulf Coast Zoo and down south. And they're very supportive of what we're doing. They give us advice. They, point us in different directions that we need to be looking at and doing different things. And so they're very supportive. The zoo community is actually very supportive. And at the same time, we want to be cognizant that, okay, there's something unique about the Nashville Zoo that would want to make people come if they knew that was there. Because there are people that, like my family, that, they go to places for the zoo. Zoos are usually the top most visited attractions in any state, right? In the state of Alabama, Birmingham Zoo is number 2 or 3 every year after the U.S. Space and Rocket Center as the most visited attraction.
Yeah.
That says something that people don't realize, that zoos are that important to, the tourism.
And we might point out, it's hard to keep up with Space and Rocket because it's a national, people come to space camp.
It's an international.
Right. And you're right.
Yeah.
So that's hard to compete with, where, people are going to, that makes their childhood, right? It makes their school experience to fly here and have this Space and Rocket experience, where you're going to get far more than just the numbers we're going to draw from more of the greater Huntsville, Alabama patrons.
Well, and actually what we'll get, when sometimes when these parents don't fly their kids to Huntsville for space camp, they drive them.
Sure.
Well, they're just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, there you go.
So what are they going to do, right? What are they doing? Well, there's some things to do, but this will just add to the additional things that they can do while they're just hanging out waiting for their kid all week during space camp. So that's also actually a positive for us. But
let me ask you this question before we go too far. When the Montgomerys and the Mobiles and the Birminghams are excited, is it more from another place to take in animals that may be potentially endangered and just kind of a good habitat? Are they more excited at that there's going to be yet another habitat or a place where animals can be protected, and or the preservation side? They're probably not as excited about, oh yeah, it's going to be great for your economic development and your revenues are going to be wonderful and it's going to help your tourism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's anything to deal with the business side of things. Yeah. Tourism and economic development and those type of things. I do believe that they enjoy having another partner in this conservation. The old days where zoos started, they were a menagerie. It was, you walked around and looked at animals you couldn't see anyplace else, and they were in small cages and
tile floors at times.
And bars and all this stuff, and it was a menagerie. At some point, and I'm not a very great historian about zoos, but I've studied them a little bit.
Some late nights.
Yeah, but somewhere on the the 70s and 80s, the focus became on saving species. I remember being in grade school in the 80s and they talking about the condors disappearing in California. Well, the San Diego Zoo took that on, and a couple other zoos, and they have brought the condors back from extinction. And so having the partners to help in preserving species and that's what they do. They're kind of arcs. Ideally, we want to have the animals out in nature where they belong, where they came from. If somebody's listening and they might ask, well, where do you get the animals? Typically, animals in zoos come from other zoos or zoological society or zoological facilities. That's where animals typically come from. Occasionally, they're rescued from the wild, whether they're injured and they can't go back in the wild and those type of things, or if they're rare, and hopefully it's continues to be rare, but the rare case where the animals are going extinct, then we'll take them out of the wild because we just don't want to lose them. And we'll do our best to preserve them and grow their population so that we can reintroduce them back on the wild. And so I think they enjoy having another set of partners in that. And that's what the modern zoo is about, is about, again, providing that connection to the public. That connection goes both ways. The animals actually, the animals that are being displayed, they're ambassadors for their species, but a lot of them do enjoy the interactions they get from the public, because that's the environment they grew up in. They didn't grow up out in the woods. They didn't grow up,
Right.
out on the plains. They grew up in a zoo or in around people, and so your excitement makes them excited, and zoos do a really good job of balancing that. If there's, again, going back to the old days, you had animals chained up in their forest. Now, animals have a choice. Do you want to go outside or do you don't want to go outside? If you don't want to go outside, okay, you don't have to go outside. So, the modern zoo is all about giving the animal the opportunity and choice to do what they want to do within the constraints to keep them safe and preserve the species. And
I wanted to I brought up this is from your materials, when you said zoos are an arc, just to kind of, and you mentioned some of this, but this is something that you all had put together to kind of drive home that point.
Yeah, and I did, on the bottom there is the thing that 7 more Alabama species are now considered extinct. It's because we're the most biodiverse that we also have the most extinctions.
Yeah.
and that's sad to say. And again, in this area, there is just a ton of opportunities in that to do conservation and to learn more about our environment and our wildlife and the things that we have here. So you did want to talk about a little bit about uniqueness with Nashville and Birmingham.
Yeah. If you can keep pulling on that thread a little bit.
Yeah. So
and while you talk, I think I'll bring up a slide I think that goes through some of those requirements. But
okay.
Go ahead.
I can get you off on tangents.
It's okay.
It's
this is good stuff,
it's cool
man.
stuff, yeah. So Nashville has some really cool things. They have a really cool tiger exhibit. They have a really good sun bear exhibit. One of the coolest things, if you go to Nashville, I don't know if you've been there yet.
Not yet.
But they have guinea pigs.
Really?
Yeah. It's just this little exhibit with a bunch of guinea pigs running around, and it's the coolest thing ever.
They from like different continents?
Well, it's to kind of a lot of zoos they group their animals by something, whether it be reptiles and mammals and birds or but this is in I think it's the Andes area, so coming from Peru and the type of those Andes, and so they got these guinea pigs there. It's one of the coolest exhibits. So I'm going to go on another tangent.
Peruvians, by the way, they do like to eat those guinea pigs.
Yes, they do. But I don't think there's anybody eating any guinea pig at the Nashville Zoo.
No.
When we were getting going there, we met with the executive director from the Fort Wayne, Indianapolis Zoo. Now, Fort Wayne, from a standpoint, is very similar, in size and different things as Huntsville, except for it's mainly blue collar. Okay. But it has what's considered one of the best children's zoos in all of the United States. And it's only open from April to, it's going to close here about at the end of the month.
Really?
Yeah.
Kind of like the extended summer months only.
And they'll open up for Halloween, for Boo at the Zoo, and some special things. But for the most part, it's only open those, mid-April to the end of September. And they make more revenue and bring in more visitors than Birmingham Zoo, which is bigger and more. Now, that's not to say that Birmingham is not a good zoo, but when we're talking to us, when I go around and talk to these zoos, I said, well, what's your special sauce? And so he told me some things which we have incorporated into our in our business plan.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing he pointed out was we built this great lion exhibit. So you want, and we just did a survey. Go on our Facebook and figure out if you want to find out what the top most wanted animals in North Alabama are. I'll tell you the number one is giraffes. But when you go to a zoo, there's your key animals that you want to go see. And lions are one of them. And so when you go to the Fort Wayne Zoo, you're going to make a beeline to the lions. Well, what do lions do? They're cats.
Yeah.
And what do cats do?
Sleep? Nothing. Yeah.
They just sit there and sleep. And so he said,
they scratch things.
People, and if you're lucky, they may be moving around a little bit, but for the most part, they just kind of lay there.
Yeah.
Because they're cats.
Not that exciting.
But you saw a lion. So now you've seen a lion for 30 seconds. You're going to be looking for the next thing. So they have, I can't remember if it's mongoose or some other, what's that? Again, my brain's going nuts. It's been a long day at work.
Like a Rolodex of animals.
But let's just say they're mongoose.
Okay.
Right next there. And those things are chasing each other around, jumping up and down.
Yeah.
And people spend minutes. And it's like a museum and other attractions where the longer the people are there, the more money they're going to spend. That's the business side of things. But also, the more they're going to connect. When you're seeing these animals chase each other and jump around and play and do all this stuff, you're connecting because they're happy. They're doing fun stuff. And it makes you happy.
Yeah.
It's infectious. And so they have, and that's what he kind of pointed out. People want to go see the big animals. They want to go see the giraffe, or the lion, the tiger, the elephant. They want to go see those things. But the things that really capture them, and for us, it may be otters.
Yeah.
If we had some, because we're going to have the Alabama natives area, we'll have some otters there, some beavers. They'll be doing stuff. That's what actually ends up capturing most of your attention.
Yeah.
Is these other things that are more involved. It's not the big stuff. You got to see them.
Yeah.
That's cool. But now you're going to spend a lot more time with those others. And each zoo has their unique things like that. And so we're making a big effort. I'm pulling this all around now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make a big effort that whatever makes those zoos special, that we don't step on that. Now, we will have tigers more than likely. That's, it's not set in stone here, but it's planned.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have some other animals that they all have, but how we present them, and we don't want to take away that specialness, and we also want to work with them because we'll be sharing animals and for different reasons and different things.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that was one of the, we're worried about, okay, they're going to be really competitive and they're not going to want us because we're kind of stepping into their area. But it's completely been the opposite. They've been very supportive and very helpful.
Yeah,
it's actually a wonderful community to be a part of.
I have I want to show your mission statement and vision statement slide.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. One, because you mentioned lions, and there's a beautiful picture of a lion here.
What is your favorite animal, by the way?
Mine, actually, I think I like penguins. And I was just saying that because based on what you were just saying, when you go to a penguin house, hold on, I got a message coming up here. Don't ask me that again. Okay. They're just very active and they're fun to watch. I could sit there and just kind of watch them swim around and do their thing. I like penguins, but I also like sea lions and otters too.
Mm-hmm. The Memphis Zoo, and I've seen a lot of zoos, so I might get this mixed up, but I believe it's the Memphis Zoo. You can walk in, and the penguins, there's no glass. They're like, you could actually touch them.
Oh, really?
Don't touch them.
Yeah, don't touch them.
But they're like right there.
Yeah.
And they're doing their thing and squawking and chasing each other and dumping in the pool and popping back out. It's a cool exhibit. So
I almost got at the Wrinkling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus when I was 8. My neighbor took me, and I almost got taken out by an elephant. We got backstage passes or something, so we went down or in the arena part where they had him kind of in cages off, outside of the arena, and then storage area, and this trunk came out. He almost got me by the neck, and luckily the guy, Mr. Collins, who's long since has passed away, rescued me, right? Like, was able to get me before it took a swipe at me. I don't know what the elephant was going to do, man, but I almost got taken out by an elephant's trunk. And I have a hard time with favorites. You know, I like a lot of things. You ask me what your favorite color. Well, I like blue, but I like black. I like red. You know, like I had struggle with favorites, but those came to mind. I've had some good experiences with penguins and sea lions and otters at the zoos of the world.
Yeah.
So part of me bringing up this slide again, which came from your material, is when you were thinking about what we were just kind of talking about. Okay, Montgomery has their thing, Mobile has their thing, Chattanooga has their thing, Birmingham. How are we going to be different, right? And then, of course, this is always tough for any business or any nonprofit that starts as what is our mission, what's our vision. But I also find that to be a really, I don't know what thought you put into that picture of that lion, but it's a great picture. I don't know. It just caught me by attention. Normally, you just look at some animals and like, okay. And that one is really, the more I look at it, the more I like that picture. But if you could, maybe you can talk a little bit about that mission statement and vision that you have, and kind of, you know, how that continues to play into moving it, you know, this effort forward.
Yeah, actually, the picture was just a happy accident.
Was it?
Yeah. But now that I see, it's like she's looking at the words, isn't it?
And also doesn't look scary.
No.
Right? Kind of stoic. Wise.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, happy accident. I can't tell you how many happy accidents there are in the work we've been doing. It's great. Yeah, and this is actually not worded the best because number 3 there often gets combined. If I can restate it,
sure.
I will. While creating a world-class zoo and aquarium, be an organization that, number 1, connects the communities and visitors of North Alabama to the world's wild places and wildlife. Number 2 is a standard of wildlife conservation, wildlife research, wildlife action, and wildlife education. And number 3 inspires a better tomorrow. So where that really comes from is, first of all, that connection. We've talked about it a couple times here. And if you want people to make a change, there's a couple different ways. One, if you want people to change, if they feel pain, they'll make change, right? Well, we don't want pain. We want happiness. That's what I saw when we're at the Birmingham Zoo. And so that connection is something that even if you're not, and there's lots of people that aren't into, the crunchy bark eating conservation. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what people might say, but they might really care that the species is still around. And at least they care. It may not be a threshold that they do something about it, but they do care, right? And if you care, then you're going to want to come visit, and that's important. That's kind of what the zoos are about. So your visit, will enable us to do conservation on your behalf. And all you got to do is come visit.
Yeah.
Right. And so by connecting, you'll make that connection and you'll do that. The other one is more of the, what we have to do. We are a conservation education. That is, when you look at some of our documents and our founding stuff, we are an organization that is about education and conservation. There are states that classify a zoo as an educational recreational facility. And education is a huge, huge component. Even when we get the zoo, a lot of people are going to consider it an attraction or even an amusement. And it does have that aspect to it. But once you get in the gate, you're going to learn something. And that's good, right? And so, hopefully that equates into action at some point. Whether you're just allowing us to do more action or you yourself are able to do the action. And at the end of the day, we just want to be a little bit better today and make it so that tomorrow will be better.
Okay.
And, you can't change the world. You're not going to just go out there and just change the world. But all these little things do add up. And if we can just do a little thing today, well, then tomorrow will be better. And that's really what this is all about. We want to be a world-class zoo because that's the standard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Huntsville's all about. When people look at Huntsville, we're world-class. We have world-class research. We have world-class education. We have world-class. That's what Huntsville is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be that. And why wouldn't we want to? But that's kind of the
Sure.
The bar. But you don't get there, necessarily by just going out there and be there. You have to put in the work, and it's one step at a time, and that little bit at a time. And that's we'll be the best in Huntsville and the best in North Alabama, and then we'll work to be the best in all of Alabama, and
Sure.
we'll work to be in the best, and we'll just grow and all at the same time. By being the best means that we're helping more people and more animals, and going that loud.
So I believe, in preparing for this podcast, I usually start my preparation at least a week out. So after, we record today, tomorrow I'll start thinking about like my next week's guest, right? And then when I go on a run, I was listening to zoo podcasts, right? Just as in preparation for this, right? Just to pick up different things and different ideas, right, to share with you, or just to kind of immerse myself in that subject matter. And then of course you sent me a bunch of stuff, and I kind of felt like, okay, a lot of kind of what I listened to, or it just started my mind thinking about financing and operating a zoo and just all that goes into it. The oldest zoos are like over in Europe. I think London's opened in like 1826, but the oldest one in the U.S. is Philadelphia. I like the Philadelphia Zoo. I've been there, but I saw in some of your material it wasn't even listed in the top 10. But I bring up Philadelphia for a couple reasons. One, similar to the way we started the podcast, and like, hey, who's Ethan Woodruff? Who is this guy? The current CEO, if you will, of that zoo came out of the financial services industry. He's like 28 years. Investment banker or whatever, and decides to kind of go a different route, right, and run a zoo. And of course, that's kind of why I mentioned it before. He was there to kind of help them from the business side and financial viability. But then, of course, you're gonna have very well trained zookeepers. You're gonna take care of your animals. But so I want to. And one thing he mentioned was all of their operating expenses are covered by earned income. Mm-hmm. And I think that you're going to be no different, where your three main revenue sources are going to be, what you get from the people who come and just pay, right? They're gonna have entrance tickets. They're gonna buy food and beverage while they're there. Anything you can get, maybe even from sponsors. But then you're gonna have donors, members, and then maybe even like endowments. That type of thing, which they have that kind of those three. And in part of that, he was talking about, and the reason I'm bringing this up too is you guys are going to have the benefit of all these lessons learned, right, from all the other zoos, whether they're still around, whether they have since failed, or how they expanded, and how we touched on a little bit. Zoos used to be more, you might go into the gorilla house and it's just a tile floor and he's now just sitting there, where it's now much more, hey, let's try to get them into their natural habitat. And so he talked a lot about how it's actually cheaper to build a lot of their enclosures and such because they're not building like actual walled facilities, right? They're doing netting and maybe cages that kind of connect and allow them to kind of move around the park. So let's talk about that as kind of where you're at. And I think we can even pull up the website as far as joining, being just a member or being a corporation. But talk about the kind of your thoughts on what the financial model looks like for the zoo.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that we had to, you got to kind of figure out a balance sheet. Mm-hmm. And to be truthful, right now it's really high level. because until we actually have certain parts of the zoo planned out with a master plan and what animals are going to be in there, you can't really determine how many zookeepers you're going to have and how many staff for this. And so right now it's still pretty high level, but we have on retainer some consultants that will help us with those things when that time comes. Now, one of the things that we're going to do is, and it's actually becoming more of a more what other zoos are trying to get to, is we're going to have a core part of the zoo. This is your traditional walking, this is where you're going to go, and you're going to see the peacocks, and you're going to see lions and different things, and it's more accessible to most people. Now, around those areas will be adventure treks. Okay. And part of this is, it's cool because everybody wants to see them in a more natural environment, like you're saying. So, instead of seeing giraffes in a paddock, I get to see giraffes out in a field.
Right.
Right. And not only just giraffes, but also some zebra, maybe some ostrich, and some other animals along with them, more like what you would actually see in Africa. And so that means that we'll have fields with giraffes and different animals and different things. And again, like you're talking about, instead of building cages, we'll build areas, which will have different ways to keep the animals in those areas. And they're coming up a lot more unique and interesting ways to do that, where from a person's standpoint, you really don't see these things. You just know that they're not going to come get you or go, if it's a lion, they're looking at the ostrich, but they can't get to them. Right. But because it's, these big spacious areas, which we all want to see animals in, but we all don't want to walk through because it's a long ride. There'll be ways to ride through them or get through them without that type of thing. And it actually, like you commented, it actually ends up being cheaper. As I was told, fences cost less than gunite. And gunite is that cement that they use to look like real rock and different things like that they make enclosures out of. So yeah, fences are a lot cheaper. And so it actually brings the cost down. And so we're going to have a lot of that capability and a lot of those features in our plans already. Now, when you look at a lot of different zoos and you kind of put them all in and look at, because you can do it. You can go on, and we did it. You can go on places like GuideStar and look at their I-99s or 990s. That's what they're 990s, and see what percentage of money did they get from donors? What percentage of money did they get from visitors? And then the AZA which is the
accreditation, right?
It's the accreditation for, and I've been told it's not a real zoo unless you're accredited by the AZA.
Right.
Now, not all zoos are accredited, but there are some pretty good ones. But
I think Birmingham's the only one accredited in Alabama.
Yes.
Is that right?
Well, no, Birmingham is accredited by the AZA, and there's another accrediting that Montgomery's done, and I know that Alabama Gulf Coast is working towards that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so but they have an AZA stands for Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So if somebody wants to look up, but it is the golden standard. Matter of fact, around the world, there's another one called WAZA, which is the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And they often refer back to the AZA and a lot of their stuff too. But they have a lot of information about all this, where this revenue comes from and where costs go. And when you look at it, and just for simplicity's sake, from an expense standpoint, once the zoo's up and running, it's almost split half and half. Half of the money that you spend goes to employees and staff, and the other half goes to taking care of the animals. It's kind of, plus or minus, but in general, and we're talking in general now. Now, on the revenue side of things, donations actually don't count as very much. And depending on the zoo, so the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, they get no support from their local government. They don't get any public funding whatsoever. it's all based on donations and all based on visitors and memberships, and then retail and that type of stuff happening in the zoo when people visit and they want to buy a little stuffed animal of their penguin.
Right.
So that, that's an example there where, again, like Montgomery is pretty much, they're subsidized by the city. Plus they have all those other things that they can get access to. But it turns out that unless there's a capital campaign, most of the donations are not very big. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing a little bit of that in our case. The donations are wonderful. We appreciate all our donors, as anybody would. You feel very humbled that people are giving, their dimes towards bringing a zoo to North Alabama. And that's one of those things that helps motivate us to keep going, because how much they want us. But it's not there's just so many other people and other organizations that are looking for those funds, and they're very worthwhile ones. Whether they have a friend who has ALS, and so the ALS Foundation, and one of my favorite charities is Make-A-Wish, and also another wonderful, and then Boys and Girls Club, or just donating to the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, or to
Singing River Trail.
Yeah. All those things. Those are wonderful things to put your money to. And if you're going to give, please do, and give to where you feel like, makes the most for the things that you're passionate about. And that's the key.
Right.
But for the operation of a zoo, and most zoos, the donations really don't, they help and they subsidize, but there's not, majority of it comes from visits, admissions and memberships.
Right.
And then one of the keys where we were a 501c3 is we also, we can get grants. It's a lot easier for us to get a grant than a private or sometimes public institution. So those are also other avenues that we
federal or state.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're expecting, I think I saw estimate 12 to 15 million per year revenue from just tickets and admission.
When we look at, again, this is the trade studies type of stuff that we look at, and you look at, we look at Birmingham, and we look at Montgomery, and we look at Nashville, and then we work U.S. wide, nationwide. Based on the number of animals, number of species, the size of the zoo, what you're going to do, kind of gives an indication of what your revenue potential is. There's a great study that came out a couple of years ago. People think, and this is another question we get, well, Huntsville's not big enough. Well, guess what? Out of, Huntsville is about the greater Huntsville area is about 500,000. So the metro area, okay, which is Limestone and Madison County. That's the metro area. There's about 500,000 people in that. Well, between 400 and 500,000 populations of metro areas, there's something like 27. You might actually be,
because I think we were like 110th in size in the U.S. based on. I'll find it while you talk.
But out of those 27, 4 or 5 don't have zoos, and Huntsville being one of them. It's like, okay, well, they have a zoo, and some of them are really great zoos, and I've been to a few of them, and so it really doesn't have a lot to do with population. I mean, there is an aspect to it, and it doesn't have to do with your GDP. There's an aspect to it, but the big one is, do you have the animals that people want to come see? There's the business side of things. How many big animals versus little animals, the species diversity, and different things like that. So there we go.
I found it.
Yeah, there. So
111th,
and 27 MSAs, and 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them don't have zoos within 30 miles. And I used to live next to Flint, so I understand that one. And the Detroit Zoo is great. And then, but yeah, even Flint has a zoo in Detroit, which is not too far away, and it has a zoo in Lansing, which is great too, and is not too far away. And one of the best zoos that I love is Toledo, so it's like stuck in the middle of all these zoo places at the moment. But no, they're great, and these are great MSAs. They all have zoos. We could have one.
That's an interesting chart. I didn't really ever think about how prevalent zoos are.
Yeah, and the point here really is to tell you that population does have an aspect to it, but it's not everything. There's other aspects to it, which we have built into our business plan.
Now, are any of these, though, not on the same level of what you're talking about? Could somebody say, that's just a pet farm, or that's a safari park, or, something that's different than, classified differently than what we intend to build here?
Yeah, well, and trying to think. Well, Fort Wayne, Indiana's on there. You see that, number 131. Mobile is Alabama Gulf Coast Zoo, which is about 25 acres. And but yeah, we're aiming a little bit bigger than these as well. But we have Birmingham is 120 acres, and they have so much. So we know from a size point of view, we should be able to be there, right? And we're not planning on being a San Diego or a Bronx or a Columbus.
Right.
We know we can't be that big, and big is relative, right? We're going to be, let's say we're going to be 300 acres. Well, that's bigger than them.
Yeah.
I think the Cincinnati Zoo is something like 70 acres or something like that. It's not really big acreage wise, but it's one of the biggest, and I use that with air quotes, one of the biggest zoos in the nation. With how many people visit and the animals that they have and everything that they have there. So we're not going to be that big, again, using air quotes. But we plan on being, comparable in size to Nashville and Birmingham, because that's where we're at.
Are you surprised at all that, it sounds like it has been tried, or the idea started at a zoo here before you got involved, and for whatever reason it didn't come to fruition. But you look at that chart and you're like, well, we certainly fall into that category of we should have a zoo from let's just say it's from an economic development standpoint. It's going to bring jobs, it's going to bring revenues, tourism dollars, right, to your area. It almost seems like, why wouldn't you, once you start to eclipse that 400,000 population mark, you should have a zoo? I mean, something kind of like a necessary, it's just kind of what you do, right, as a community.
Well, and I can give you lots of quotes and stuff. I'll give you a couple. We met with Director Lee Sintel. He's the tourism director for the state of Alabama. Can't remember exactly what the department name is, but he actually lived and worked in Decatur. He helped create. He was the marketing director of the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. If you ever have a chance to sit down, if you even get him on your podcast, if you could do that, he's amazing.
Okay.
We sat in his office.
What's his name again?
Lee Sintel.
Lee Sintel. Okay.
Yeah. He has stories, and it's just amazing. He's written a wonderful book as well. But he knows this area. He worked for the Decatur Daily as a journalist, and so he knows this area. And he said that the leadership in this area wants to be considered a number one city or metro.
Yeah.
And he said, if you want to be one of those number ones, you have to have first rate amenities, and a zoo is that first rate amenity. We have a lot of great things. It's just kind of finishing off the package a little bit. And you ask, well, why haven't we have one before? And we could go long history and stuff. But one of the things that has come up with is when I talk to people about the zoo, and the first thing they're doing is they're judging me. Okay, who's this guy? He's not even a Southerner.
Right, he's from Montana.
It's surprising I'm wearing a cowboy hat. I got one, but I don't wear it.
Or
you
who
know,
was the previous guy or gal?
Yeah, yeah. But they're asking first. They want to
Right.
know. Okay, well, who is this person?
Sure.
And so I have to prove myself in 5 minutes. I got to prove that okay, I'm not some crazy person that just loves animals and want to pet.
It's not like you and your wife just saw that movie, We Bought a Zoo, and said, you know what, let's do that.
Yeah, that zoo is that. I think that is way too realistic. But one of the things that, and again, I talked to the zoo executive directors and a bunch of the people in the zoo community, and they're testing me to see, because people, I'm going to create a zoo. Well, first of all, what kind of zoo are you going to create? Are you going to just create a roadside zoo? Well,
Yeah.
that's not what we need. We don't need any more of these roadside zoos.
Right.
Now, why are you doing this? Are you just doing it because you want to have the opportunity to play with animals, exotic animals all day long? Well, that's not going to work either. So those are already fails out of the gate. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it for our community. We're doing it because we love animals too, and we want to see them, these species stay around for our kids and our grandkids and for future generations. And when we start going down that path, then they're like, oh, okay, well, at least what you want to do is legitimate. And then we talk about the fact, okay, well, it's a business. We have to be able to support ourselves. We have to be self-sustaining. So we have to design a business plan to do that. And so we go down that route. And then now that's where that legitimacy starts to come into play, is, those type of things. Other attempts, and first of all, those things are hard, and it has been a hard, long road, and we know it's still going to be a hard, long road continuing, but we're not going to stop. We're all committed to this, all 66 of us so far, and our organization is growing.
Yeah.
And plus we have lots of supporters. I get emails and Facebook posts, DMs, and all from people just really cheering that they want this. Matter of fact, when we first started this, they said, we're going to get a zoo. Now all we need is a Trader Joe's and a Cheesecake Factory.
Well,
guess what?
You got both of those.
We got both of those. So we got to get that zoo part.
Yeah.
But those are the things. But other people have tried this, and I think there's the commitment wasn't there. It's a good idea, but when it starts getting hard, well, I got better things to do with my free time. I don't have much free time. Many people on our volunteers don't have free time because they've given it all up for this endeavor. The other thing is that we're not doing this so that we can pet animals. Matter of fact, you won't get to pet animals.
Yeah.
At an AZA accredited zoo, what you can come in contact with is very, very much prescribed. So you can go to the goats, and help feed them and at the petting area. But if the goats leave, you can't chase them. They're going to go their safe place, and because they're tired of people now.
It's like you were describing me earlier. That 5-year-old boy that had the butterfly in his finger, if he goes to touch it, it's going to fly away.
Yeah.
Most likely. But what you're going to do is, at a safe distance, you're going to get to experience. You go to a zoo because you're going to get that close, as close as you can into a zoo, into a habitat that is somewhat similar to what that animal would be in the wild.
Right.
And that's the experience, right? That you're providing.
Yeah. A member of our board, he is an avid zoo person. Andy Crocker, wonderful. He works for Dynetics and works on space launch stuff. He has lots of stories to tell, but he just came back from an African safari, and he's just beaming, telling us all these stories about seeing these animals out in the wild.
Really?
You're not gonna go pet them. Matter of fact, again, I grew up in Montana.
Yeah.
And I shake my head every time I hear about somebody wanting to go pet a bison at Yellowstone.
Yeah.
I grew up around bison. You don't pet them.
Right.
You stay away from them.
Right.
But in a zoo, it's a safer environment so that people can connect and be as close as possible with them, and for the safety of the people and for the safety of the animal too.
Sure.
Right.
I wanted to mention something tying together kind of the Singing River Trail, but even in your mission statement, connecting. It's about connecting, right? So you have this they're doing what they can to connect all of top Alabama, right? From the Shoals all the way to Bridgeport on the far east side. Now you have a zoo, really, I think, is kind of icing on the cake to everything else that Huntsville has either built or is in the process, right? It's expanding, it's exploding. And one thing that was interesting, when John Kovach was in here, a lady in her will changed her will to donate some amount of money to the Singing River Trail. Right, it meant that much to her, and I was commenting like, I don't know how old the lady was, but she lived, some large portion of her life. This thing comes along, and it was that important to her to say, you know what, I'm gonna will some money right to the Singing River Trail, and there's gonna be those types of people that are that passionate about, that have been waiting, right?
Yep.
For someone like Ethan to come along and bring it and put in a zoo, because it's gonna have so much benefit. When you people, what do the kids always say when they go somewhere? There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. Like, what, you could live anywhere in the country, and some kid's going to say that. There's nothing to do. Well, we got a Space and Rocket Center. You've got the zoo. And then go on and on and on with your list, right? But I think a zoo is kind of one of those things that my hat's off to you and to everyone involved. We just moved here 7 months ago, right? So now it's like, oh, this is great, and just doing research for this show. How exciting. Let's talk about the marketing, if you will, and kind of what are those groups that you see that are going to be. We talked a little bit earlier about just the traveler, the passerby that maybe had no idea. They see the billboards, they stop. Maybe they knew, and it was part of their plan when they drive down to Gulf Shores, right? They're gonna stop at the zoo on the way. Can you talk through a little bit about what you see as those customers that take us into the market analysis?
Yeah. So, and again, some of this stuff has already been done for us through the AZA. They're looking at a lot of this stuff. Then other things we had to do ourselves. Your key demographic is the 25 to 35-year-old mom with 2 kids under the age of 5.
Okay.
Excuse me. And that's your key demographic. And when you think about Huntsville and Madison, and now Athens is getting there, and Decatur. And again, I want to make sure that we include all these 4 cities and all the communities in between, because this is regional. This is regional. This is what's becoming a large metro area, a combined metro area. And it's important that we acknowledge that this growth is not just happening to Huntsville. Well, it ends up being the bigger city, and
sure.
By fault or default, people just refer as, but this is extending beyond that.
And as a note, I've actually removed the Huntsville, Alabama from my logo, and now it just says Our Town Podcast, like on the screen. For that kind of very reason, I didn't want anybody to think that I only can talk to a guest that lives in Huntsville, right, or Madison. So now it's more of like, okay, it's all of Alabama, any community, any of our towns, right, that are beloved. Go ahead.
So with all this growth and we have more jobs than we have employees. I mean, you work and you're hiring employees all the time, and I'm certain right now you don't have enough to do all the work that you need done, and I'm in similar environments and situations, and we see it around us. So who's coming to Huntsville? Well, there are families coming to Huntsville like yours and mine that are a little bit older, but then there's the young folks coming straight out of college. And if they're coming from one job, they're going to try to get, maybe get both the jobs. But essentially what we have going on are these bedroom communities with a lot of just, one spouse working and the other spouse at home doing the, you have to have a side hustle now. So doing the side hustle at home, or they're both working at home.
Residual income.
Yeah. But when you have kids, especially little kids, you have to have some place to go, whether it's for play dates or those type of things. And those become our primary, during the daytime, those and field trips are going to be your zoo's primary visitors. And so that's what happens during the daytime. And then there is a situation where I think this is based on talking to other executive directors, and they have varying views on this, but a lot of zoos close at 5:00.
Mm-hmm. Why?
Why are you closing at 5:00?
Yeah.
Well, because my staff has to go home. Well, okay. But I didn't get off work till 5:30 today. Right. So the way the Fort Wayne Zoo makes money is during the summertime, especially. And again, they're only open, open a certain amount of time or of the year, but they're open in the evenings, and it becomes a family place to go gather and eat. That's dinner at the zoo.
Yeah.
And, and they make it a thing where the families can come, and, we're building some of that into our plans as well, to take advantage of that. And, so really the only demographic that isn't super excited about zoos, it turns out to be, is your 12 to 18-year-olds.
Really?
Yeah. Your teenagers aren't super excited about it. So a lot of zoos are doing, trying to do. So if you see amusements and rides at zoos, usually it's to capture them, to give them something to do.
I would say the only exception might be maybe you're 16 and up, where they're going on a date.
Yeah.
Right. And you probably see that with college, right? There's a lot of dates at a zoo. Right? What a great romantic thing for a guy to take a girl to the zoo.
So, and what we're planning on doing, another thing you talked about a little bit, we're learning a lot of things from other zoos. You were talking about the Philadelphia Zoo. We were talking to the Columbus Zoo. We actually visited the Columbus Zoo and got a tour of some of their facilities, and was able to talk to them. And I asked him, I said, well, what did you learn during COVID that you would do different? First thing he said was, we'd put all of the majority of our revenue producers out front of the gate. So you can't, for some reason, during COVID, they wouldn't let people walk around in the open air at a zoo. And so a lot of their revenue things that they could open and people could go to get, a gift shop or food or those type of things, they were locked behind the gate, so they couldn't get to them.
Gotcha.
So if you look at our plans, we have what we're calling, kind of, if you've ever been to Stove House, kind of like a Stove House in front of the gate, where there'll be shops and there'll be food and there'll be entertainment area, and it's kind of like a mini city walk right in front of the gate.
Yeah.
And you'll get to be able to get to it to and from inside the zoo or outside the zoo, but it's a place where people can gather, right? And that's part of that marketing that we learned and we learned from COVID. And again, there's lots of great lessons that people learned from COVID. Zoos weren't the most technologically advanced when it comes to admissions and stuff. Now, it's contactless admissions and be able to just walk in.
Yeah.
You don't have to be stopped. You just, here's my card, boom, and you're in.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool things that COVID has really done for zoos that we're taking advantage of as well.
Interesting. One of my, not that I don't have a favorite amusement park in Alabama yet. I don't quite frankly know where they all are, but King's Dominion is an amusement park just north of Richmond on I-95. And thinking back, it's been open for probably since the 70s. But when you go in, they have one ride. So like their main gates don't open until, let's say, 10 o'clock. But they're in their it's almost like a foyer, right? Their entrance, if you will. So let's say there's an entrance to the park, to all the rides and all that, and this is kind of the entrance to that front area where they have shops, and they have one ride you can ride until the actual gates open. But I think it's either going to come in and do some shopping and stuff before, or it's meant to be the higher end things. You're gonna buy some stuff on your way out, right? But they kind of feed you in there. You have to go that way, right?
Yeah.
To either enter or exit, and trying to catch some shoppers and stuff. Because once you get out into the park, it's probably the last thing on your mind. Yeah,
especially if you're a mom with, or a dad, or a grandma and grandpa, and you got little ones, and you've been walking around. And this is something else that we're going to work really hard on, as you mentioned earlier. it's hot in Alabama.
Yeah, sure.
And you haven't quite been here. It does get cold in Alabama. My wife got rid of all of her winter coats when we moved down here. I'm like, sweetheart, it's
going to get cold.
And so, being an all-weather zoo is really important. So, finding different ways to make it comfortable, not just for us, but also for the animals, in an all-weather zoo. But at some point, those little ones are going to get tired and cranky. And so so they're, you're going to do that one last thing. Okay, let's just do that one. Let's see this one last thing, and then we'll leave. And again, trying to make that experience so wonderful that even with that cranky little one that you're trying your best to, and we've all had them, and we smile and and say bless you, but trying to make that experience as best as possible.
Yeah.
Because as they walk out that cranky little child's going to want something from the gift shop, and so, there's a lot of thought that goes into placement of different things and making it so. Another one here is we have stay-at-home parents on our board of directors, and we did that for a reason, because our market is those stay-at-home parents. That's going to be, it's not all of our market, but it's a good portion of it.
Sure.
So, sometimes I come up with these really great ideas. I say, what do you guys think about this? And the stay-at-home parents they just shake their head and go, no,
not good.
No, that ain't going to work. just stop right there.
Right.
And they're looking at you like, what we need is more bathrooms. Put more bathrooms around the zoo.
Gotcha.
And with changing areas. That's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or don't put the play place all the way at the back end of the zoo.
Right.
Put a couple little ones in different places so that when, and this is great information.
Absolutely.
Let
me ask you this. Probably not hard at all to get all the school systems to sign up to have field trips like the elementary school kids. Is that not a difficult task?
Well, we already have a lot of interest from different schools, just for us to come in and do kind of an in-school field trip. Our education department does some curriculum for the schools, so we have had the opportunity to do some of that. And I don't think it'll be too hard. I know that there are some schools that do make field trips up to Nashville or to Birmingham zoos.
Yeah.
That's also the other big thing that we've heard a lot from is that, I want to go to the zoo down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to get in the car.
Yeah.
To go to the zoo in Birmingham or Nashville, it's about 2 hours away, but that's 2 hours there, 2 hours back. That's 4 hours. That's half your day, plus you're there. That's a full day thing. But if you go to our zoo, you're just going to go down the road.
Yep.
You're going to go spend the morning there, and then you have your afternoon to do something else if you need to. Or we'd love you to just spend the whole day.
Yeah.
But either way, it's going to be a lot more convenient. And so when these schools, they don't have to travel as far. We see that that's going to be a big deal. Like I said, our educational department's already outlined all the Alabama standards that would benefit from a zoo, and we have curriculum, that some of it we're already working on or using for schools, and the other stuff that we'll have available when schools visit and everything. There's a huge educational component to all this, but again, the normal public's just going to see an amusement or attraction.
Yeah.
But there's a huge educational component that we want to do that we'll provide to the community.
Let's play we're going to play the quick six as we kind of probably start nearing the end of this. The quick six is just, I'm going to ask you 6 questions. Your answers don't necessarily have to be quick, but it's just a little bit of a fun way to kind of tie together this episode and learn a little about you, maybe a little additional. All right, you ready to play?
All right, let's do it.
Well, and it's always easy to ask someone kind of that favorite question. So, favorite zoo animal. I don't know if you've mentioned it in this podcast or not, but what is Ethan's favorite?
So I'm a little bit like you. It's hard to determine which one. So depends on the day, but when you talk to my wife, she will tell you that a lot of my favorites depend on the day, my likes and dislikes. Giraffe or a marmoset.
Okay.
So big or really small?
Yeah. The chore, working on that farm in Montana, growing up, the chore that you despised having to do.
Well, as a kid, getting up to do chores was what I despised doing. It's funny, though, when you move away from the farm, you miss moving pipe. And for those that don't understand irrigation, back in the West where there's not as much rain and stuff, you actually had to irrigate your fields. And so you move pipe, and it's just a mosquito fest.
Yeah.
But, I do miss some of that. And then, haying in the summer as well, bucking bales, and again, being out with the animals. One time when I was probably like 6 years old, we had workhorses, so big Belgian workhorses, and we had one out in the corral, and it was my job to make sure that he was fed and watered. And so if you've seen these big old tubs that you can put water in you go to Tractor Supply, you can see them. A little kid like me at 4 and 5, 6 years old, it was like a small swimming pool, which we did use. But one time I was out watering him, and when they drink a lot of water, so to fill that back up, it takes a while. And so while it was filling up, he was there and he was drinking, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to ride this horse. And I jumped on the back of this big Belgian, and he started trying to bite me and stuff. But he was, and finally I couldn't dodge him anymore, so I jumped off and finished my chore and went in the house, and I got in trouble because that horse was not broke to ride or do anything at that point yet.
Right.
It was still
what
a
are you
colt.
thinking? You're 4.
Well, 6, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But getting up to do chores was probably the biggest chore that I disliked.
Now you have, is it 4 daughters?
I do.
So what's the current favorite family outing when you guys are all together? I know you might have some older kids, but right now in Huntsville, Madison, you guys are over like in the Hampton Cove area, right? Or over the mountain.
Yeah.
From here, we're off County Line Road. What's the family favorite thing to do?
Other than, just get together and talk and laugh and do those family things, which we do pretty often, which is great. I actually like going to the movies with them.
Do you?
Yeah, especially a couple of my daughters, they share a lot of the same genre and stuff. Right now Marvel is big, so I'm not into it as much as they are.
Yeah.
I got them interested, but they have taken it to a whole new level. But,
Gotcha.
No, it's fun. And talking about different things, just sharing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Animal you're afraid of?
So growing out in the West, hearing the
Rattlers?
Yeah, rattlesnakes. That was drilled into me. You were careful. You didn't walk around big rock piles and stay away from that. So, that probably hearing that sound was probably the one that brought you the quickest fear.
All right, so now you got to jump into your DeLorean and go back in time. Where did you go on your first date with your wife?
The bowling alley. Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, it was the bowling alley because so funny, we didn't really like each other, but our friends told us that we liked each other. And so they convinced us. And so I did a test date, kind of a group test date, where we went out to the bowling alley with a lot of friends. And that's when we first started holding hands. But the first date that was just us together, she planned, in Bozeman, there's a canyon called Highlight Canyon. And she she blindfolded me, got me in the truck, and drove me up this canyon, and we had a nice picnic
That's cool.
dinner up the canyon as we watched the sunset and everything. So that was probably the first official date as boyfriend girlfriend.
Bowling alley's pretty strong then. I'm going to ask you 7 questions. So
Okay.
this one's easy. This is just a multiple choice. So the Nashville Soccer Club, their minor league team, the MLS Next league, there's going to be a Huntsville team,
Right.
to be named. Would you rather go to a soccer game, Huntsville Havoc, or the Trash Pandas? If I gave you the option, I gave you tickets to any 3 on a Saturday night, which one are you choosing?
Wow. So I've been to quite a few Trash Panda games, and they're fun.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, going tomorrow night.
We are too? No. Sunday. We're going Sunday, and then we're also I'm going next Thursday.
All right. Yeah.
Playoff game.
I've never been to a professional soccer game or a hockey game. I'm thinking I might want to go to the Havoc, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dress warmly. It gets cold in there.
Yeah, I understand. But, you know, I got some winter coats.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you do. And as you guys all talk, this is kind of that kind of like a favorite question as you talk amongst yourselves as a committee and what's important to you. What's that first animal that's important that has a new habitat at the to be named the North Alabama Zoo?
So interesting you asked that. So we kind of have a unofficial ambassador animal.
Okay.
That lives at my house. And it is a cicada tortoise.
Okay.
So this is the 3rd largest tortoise in the world.
Whoa.
Yeah. So right now he's only 2. Well, I say he, it could be a she. We don't find out for another few years. But he's probably the size of a small dinner plate. He'll get to be about the size of a trash can lid.
Okay.
And they live to be 85 years old.
Wow.
So when we got this animal, knowing that if the zoo took too long, the zoo's coming. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, sure.
That my grandson would have to take care of it because the rest of us would be dead. But no, the tortoise's name is Twickenham.
Okay, sure.
So we named it after the district in Twickenham, and so we just call him Twick. Twick goes around and visits schools. Matter of fact, if you look on our website and our Facebook page, you'll see Twickenham in different places. And people ask us, "Are you bringing Twickenham?"
It's probably been cycling through the slideshow.
Yeah,
on that other screen.
So Twickenham would probably be the first animal that is there. Now, there's some key animals that we want to make sure that we have. Since giraffes are the most favorite in North Alabama, we'll definitely want to have those. There are some animals that we don't know if we'll have. The University of Alabama's mascot's an elephant, and so we have to look very carefully about. Again, we want to be sustainable.
Yeah,
but we also want to take care of the animals, and we want to make sure that those animals can thrive. Elephants need a lot of room, and they also need groups. They can't just be by themselves. And so if there's an opportunity and we can do it, great, we'll try to do it. If not, we're going to support other zoos that are doing a great job in that. And so there's when we look at animals, it's actually a very carefully orchestrated decision.
Sure.
So
I think I saw in your data that an elephant's $70,000 a year to care for.
A healthy one.
A healthy one.
Yeah. And but like females, they need more females around them. Typically, they're going to also have there's some relationship. They're like sisters and aunts and those type of things.
Yeah.
Birmingham is great. They have a bachelor's group, and we want to support that as well. Yeah.
Interesting. The Philadelphia Zoo CEO, going back to that interview I was listening to, he was talking about how it's very easy in a way to bring animals in, but there are some hard decisions that have to be made on at some point saying, hey, we can no longer support this animal. And elephants was one that they had to make a hard decision in Philadelphia and say we can no longer, for various reasons, do this, which can be difficult, right? When you're ending the habitation of a certain animal that people may like, but there's all kinds of reasons that go into maybe why you should not, right? Whether it's cost or health conditions.
And again, at the point of the zoo, is that arc.
Yeah.
And if that arc can't have the animal thrive in it, and then there are animals that aren't shown in public that live at zoos. So not all animals are on display.
Sure.
So, but if that animal can't thrive in that environment, then we're not doing it a service. We're doing it a disservice. And so that's really, really important when looking at the animals that we bring in and what we can do.
Gotcha.
We want to make, bring the public all the things that they would love to see, because obviously that's going to bring them in to see them. But there's a balance there, and definitely if the animal can't thrive in that environment, then then we won't have them.
Well, my lights are starting to go out. If you noticed on the set with Ethan, he's lost his RGB lights, which going over the 2-hour mark. But it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And I think, like most guests, I plan on doing this for a long time, and we're definitely going to have you back, because there's going to be updates on the phases and where we're at. And I think I know I'll be interested in hearing, like, hey, what's going on? What's the progress?
Yeah, we'll have some. We have a couple updates coming up here in the next few weeks.
Okay.
Small updates, but we hope to have some bigger updates in a few months to come. So yeah,
sounds good. We look forward to it.
Cool.
Hey, Ethan, thanks for coming.
Well,
thanks for
being on
the program, and spread the word.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you.